So, another ZQuest video. This one completely unrelated to any of the current projects I have going on for once in a while. Um, this one is a new header for 2.55 scripting for easily creating credits, like so. That's it. That is a quick example script, but you can put basically whatever text you want there fairly simply. So since it's actually very simple, let's actually look at the code here. Here is a test script using the thing. So I'm just using the namespace so that I don't need to put that before every one of these functions. That's all using does. Relatively new thing being a 2.55 thing. Now, some things like Tango effectively do this by having Tango underscore at the beginning of every one of their functions. But with this is what this would look like without using. Or can just do, whoops, undid one too far there. Or this with using. So this is why namespaces are better than doing the name of your header underscore at the beginning of every function. Is because with using you can ignore it. Because I know all this is credits because it's credits function. And I happen to know that I have nothing here that conflicts with this. But yeah, basically, there are a couple different things configured by constants up here. Most are fairly simple. You can add a header, which is the category of credits. For instance, graphic designers, sound designers, playtesters, and then lines are just lines. Funny thing is that headers, actually, if you call add header, it is just going to call add line. There's a bunch of overloads here just to let you do a bunch of different things, but all of them boil down to this one function, which basically figures out if you're left aligned, right aligned, or centered, and positions accordingly. And if the bitmap it has isn't large enough, it actually does a semi-fancy thing to make it bigger, which actually involves creating an entirely new bitmap because there's no way to resize an existing bitmap. And then it draws the message. So actually, it is able to keep going for as tall a bitmap as you need. And then it keeps track of the current position that it's adding stuff to. So when you add a line, it adds it to a certain position on the bitmap, and then it adds the spacing and the font height to the current Y. So the big thing here is spacing is actually the only thing that differs between a header and a line, because headers use the header spacing, and lines use the line spacing. You could totally just call this one directly and specify all of these parameters, and that'll work. You can define your own stuff, your own font format, font color, and spacing. And that works fine. I just have a bunch of these overloads to make it simpler. For instance, headers are going to use what I have set as the default font, and the default format, and the default header spacing. And it's just going to do all of that. So I don't need to call a bunch of parameters. It's simple. It's just a simplified version to make it easier. Now, I actually wanted these to use a different font, so I passed a font. If I wanted to add a bunch of things in one font and then add a bunch of things in another font, I could set font. But here, I'm changing it just for one thing and then going back to the default, so set font is wasteful. You could do it, but it's a waste. I'll also add space. I don't actually use this. This just adds blank space of some amount. But here, basically, I have constants up here for the default spacing, and they get loaded into this array, because then you can use these setters to change it. So if you want to set the font, set the font color, set the font spacing or the header spacing, you can set all of those here. They start as whatever these constants are. A couple other things. The background color here is not configurable from the script. It has to be modified on this constant. This by default should be black. So, and the default height is the height of the bitmap that it starts with. The expansion y amount is how much it increases the height by each time it runs into that as an issue. Theoretically, if it needs to increase the size too much in a single frame, it's going to run out of bitmaps, so you might need to mess with these constants. Either make this one bigger or make this one bigger. You shouldn't really need to make them smaller, ever. Bigger can be wasteful, I guess. Really, this should be 1024. There you go. Now, that honestly, it should be enough room for most of your credits. But yeah, let's double both of those. It shouldn't be that wasteful. Yeah. So this is all just stored in a global data array for the namespace. And basically, when you init, it rents a bitmap. This is using the new bitmap.zh header. So it'll rent the bitmap if it's not valid. If it's valid, it will release it so that it doesn't leak bitmaps. And regardless, it will acquire a new one, which it will then clear, and it will then reset all of the data. So when you init, it resets everything to default, including the Y position. So this is basically to clear the entire credits that you have set up. So if you potentially have multiple credits, and like you can have a credits that displays, but then you could get to another credits in the same session, then really you just need to init before you set up the credits to run every time. Because it'll set it up if it hasn't been before, or if it has. Either way, it'll just clear everything to default, so it's ready to start a new credits. Resize, you could call manually, shouldn't need to. I explain the setters. Also, output here I have, which if I go to my directory, I'm actually use this in the example script, and this will output over here. Down here, PNG, or well, could output whatever file types CC can output, but this will actually print out your entire bitmap as you've drawn it. This doesn't actually draw the entire height of the created bitmap, it draws the height you've used using a temporary bitmap. So this is what I used. I added a header, a line, a header, a line. So you can see how it adds, it does different space depending on if it's a header or not, and this is basically what it does. Yeah, it should be simple enough to understand. Now, for people fairly good at scripting who know how to play with bitmaps, you can probably do some pretty fancy stuff without needing this at all. But especially for people who are less into scripting, or just haven't touched a bitmap ever, haven't touched script drawing ever, like this should be a simple enough, nice, quick entry into having a credit sequence. Also black the way here. So here's the drawing function. So draw credits just draws them to the screen, draws a black background, has some math here to figure out stuff if you have a negative y that you pass to it, and then it draws the credits to the screen. Now, why do I have to handle a negative y? Well, because I actually use a negative y here. Negative y means that the credits are currently off the bottom of the screen and are about to scroll up. Scroll speed, by the way, is modifiable by calling that. So right now, this is actually scrolling at double speed. If I play this again, this is double speed, which is 2 pixels per frame. If I actually change that back down to 1 and recompile, this is the slowest it can go. Can't go slower than 1. Well, actually, can it go slower than 1? It won't visually move in smaller increments than 1. But no, it can go slower than 1 because it'll round the Y. Yeah. So yeah, it can go in decimal increments. It's now at 0.5 there. It's basically just moving 1 pixel every 2 frames. Or if I want to really make it slow, this is 0.125. Yeah, you can see it starts to jitter there because it's moving 1 pixel every 8 frames. So, probably a bit slow, but it works. Or quarter speed. That look decent. A little jittery. Passable, but a little jittery. 0.5 works nicely though, I think. Or you could play Nier Automata and have a joke credit sequence like this. That was speed of 20 for the record. And let me switch this back to the map pad. The black delay here is just a number of frames where it will just draw black. Simple enough. Yeah, simple enough. So yeah, this put together, and obviously I'm killing the game with game end here. For a proper quest, you'd probably want game save and quit in 2.55 so that it saves that you've beat the game. If game end just kills everything, game save and quit would save and then quit to title screen. Basically the same as doing F6 save. For the record, game save and then game end is not the same thing as game save and quit. Game save and then game end will not save anything that the global exit script does. Game save and quit will run the global exit script, then save, then quit. So just a very minor difference, but yeah, that's a new thing in 2.55. But yeah, I mean, should be simple enough to understand. Doesn't take any string, either a string, a literal, or if you want to do some fancy thing like get your playtime. I actually have, let me actually just give a quick example. Actually, no, I don't know. I don't think I have that header downloaded. One of the headers, time.zh, I believe it's called, that Sarai added, has some functions I had created for Paper Zelda, which should be in here still probably for, yeah, doing math for you on game time to figure out your hours, minutes, seconds, etc. So you could put your playtime in the credits using those, for instance. For simplicity's sake, let me just show a quick example. I'm just going to rip that right there. That's so bad, but and let me actually get this. Obviously, I'm not including these like this in the script final, but for now, that should do. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's give an example of what that would do. Um, so yeah, 1.1 seconds because it instantly started the credits. That's wonderful. Which does output fine to that. So yeah, like you can do some fancy stuff like that if you want to. And like that works with string manipulation. Go check out the time.zh header for the functions to get the time like that. But I mean, yeah, that should all work fine. I'll probably post this on the database then if this is working so perfectly well. Yeah. Though I'm not actually going to use, I shouldn't use using here. Using is not something to use in a header. So even though this is an example script in a header, not a good idea. Because what if someone else has a global function called add header or add line, then this would give compile errors. That is why you be careful when you use using. And you, if you do this before every time, that will never have an issue. Using can have issues, so do beware of that. Just a 2.55 thing. But yeah, so this should be fine. This, for the record, will compile identically. There's no difference after it compiles to this and the other way. It's identical. Except, well, actually, it might compile slightly faster because it doesn't need to scan the using namespaces. Given there's one using namespace, so... but this theoretically might compile faster. But yeah, so this is a nice credits script. Should prove useful to some people. I know someone was asking about it in the dev Discord earlier, which actually what got me thinking about it. But anyway, that's all for this video. See ya.